commitment, dedication coming from your side. Actually, there may be various, say, previous mistakes, some kind of mishaps, but we can forget about that. And right now we are trying to be honest and trying to maintain kind of a self-restraint, and basically to maintain kind of a bodily and verbal good conduct. So one sense actually it will tell us that we are more appropriate and we are more deserving to a further practice. Because sometimes what happens is, if our sila is not well, it can give us a lot of kind of a headache, in the sense that is giving kind of an inner chatter, kind of an accusing tone, so that will deviate us from our practice. So because what we are trying to do is a kind of a mental development, that is bhavana, and it requires fair amount of bodily restraint as well as the verbal restraint. So therefore, as a kind of a contribution towards our mental development, it is necessary to maintain a good conduct. So maintaining fair amount of silence and not involved with too much distractions during the practice is important. So that's why usually in our monastery, if we are enrolling the yogis, so we usually accept or we obtain their cell phone, because that has become a major distraction. So therefore I request all of you to maintain a fair amount of restraint regarding those social media and all these different other possibilities of distracting yourself, and try to restrain yourself as much as possible through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind. So if we are maintaining that kind of sila, the sense restraint and the body and the verbal restraint, Buddha say it can contribute to the samadhi. It can contribute to the development of the concentration, the collectedness of the mind. And secondly, Buddha mentioned the Sutta. So that is what currently what we are doing, basically maintaining some kind of connection with the Buddha's teaching. It is not that we are practicing something our own, rather it is a teaching coming from ancient times, and it has practiced by many, and it is coming from the Buddha, and many arahants and all the other noble ones have practiced that. So we are also trying to do the same thing. So connecting our practice with the teaching is quite important. So that's why we are, even during the discussion, we are referring certain suttas so that we have some concrete evidence. And that is Sutta Anuggahita, but what we are getting as a support from the Buddha's teaching. And on the other hand, I'd like to connect here some kind of an attitude that you need to maintain during the practice, because as we discussed during the discussion, there are three forms of knowledge, we can say. The first one is the Suttamaya Panya, the second one is the Chintamaya Panya, and the third one is the Bhavanamaya Panya. Suttamaya Panya is what we just discussed. So that is where we gather some knowledge from the books and through the teachings, through the, say, the Dhamma sermons. So it's a kind of a collection of more information from our canon. So that is also important. So that acts as a kind of a protection to us when certain wrong interpretations are put on to us, so we can recognize whether they are correct or wrong depending on our own understanding. But on the other hand, when we are going to the Chintamaya Panya, so that is where we do a kind of a reflection, kind of an analysis, comparison within ourselves, and then it is leading to a further understanding of the Buddha's teaching. But when we come into the third one, that is the Bhavanamaya Panya, experiential knowledge, it is purely depending on our experience. So actually the sutta I have selected also emphasize that, and therefore giving prominence to experience is quite important. So meditative knowledge is therefore quite different from the previous two, and we need to contribute in a different way. The previous one actually have some kind of an academic reference, but the third one, the last one, is purely experiential, so that we have to start as a beginner. So that's why, if you can remember during the guided sitting, so what we are discussing or what we are emphasizing is very basic. quite ordinary. Those are not extraordinary. Those are not kind of say special. Those are quite ordinary. So that is quite important. So the basic practices, the tools, mechanisms are very, very simple. So say for example, when we are observing breathing, say when we are observing rising and falling, or while we are walking, maintaining our attention onto our steps. So those are very, very basic and quite ordinary. But they are the tools contributing to the deeper knowledge. So therefore, don't misunderstand thinking that the tools are quite ordinary and very simple, and how such can provide a deep understanding. Rather, when we are continuing that kind of a practice, it will slowly enhance our understanding, and it will lead to a different kind of a understanding rather than our simple gathering of knowledge. So it is completely different from the Sutta jnana and the Chintamaya jnana, and it is purely based on the experiential knowledge. And another point is that in order to develop such kind of an experiential knowledge, we need to keep aside what we have learned. So therefore there could be various people who are well learned, have a lot of degrees, a lot of academic background, and you have read so many suttas, and you have heard so many Dhamma sermons, and you are filled with so much of information. But during your practice, you need to keep them all aside. So that is very difficult. Actually, during the practice, sometimes that book knowledge can come forward before the experiential knowledge. So the experiential knowledge is quite innocent and to the point, and it is very direct. But on the other hand, the book knowledge is maybe fairly comprehensive, quite complicated, and it can hinder the development of the experiential knowledge. So therefore, as a practitioner, when you are starting your practice, so you have to have a very lighter mind, very relaxed attitude, thinking that you don't know anything and you are like a beginner. So one Zen teacher, actually one of the books quite popular, Zen mind, beginner's mind. So Zen mind is a beginner's mind. So our practice has to start with such a beginner's mind, irrespective of how many years that we have practiced. Every time if we can sit as a beginner, then that will contribute more towards the practice. So being a beginner, being well grounded, maintaining kind of an innocent attitude is quite helpful in that sense. So therefore, that is with respect to the experiential knowledge, and therefore Sutta Panya has to be somewhat kept aside during our practice. And the third one Buddha mentioned is the discussion, what we call as the Sakaccanugahita, where we need to contribute to the discussion. So that's why during the afternoon we had a fairly good discussion, because kind of an open discussion, contributing from various sources and looking from different angles and suggesting various other alternatives, and again preparing the Buddha's teaching and sharing our own practical knowledge. So all these things are contributing towards a kind of successful practice. So that's why during the discussion time, so you all can contribute and we can have a good discussion, and we can participate, and it doesn't mean that we are wasting our time, because sometimes even though we think our thought or our decision could be correct, sometimes there may be various alternatives available, and that also has to be investigated. Sometimes we might have referred a particular section, particular practice, particular tool, particular tradition, but still there may be various other opportunities available and various other techniques available. So due to the discussion time, so those things also possible to come out. So therefore, the discussion is also quite important. Sakaccanugahita. The last two, actually in this Anugahita Sutta, you can refer that Anugahita Sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. So Buddha mentioned about the tranquility meditation as well as the insight meditation, insight practice, which also have to be supported. So through those meditative practices also, this practice has to be supported. Samathanugahita. So Samathanugahita basically refers tranquilizing the mind, calming down the mind, and we can say fairly concentrating the mind, because with a scattered mind, distracted mind, we can't continue this basically the experiential knowledge, bhavaname panya. So in order to achieve that bhavaname panya, we have to have a fairly concentrated mind at the beginning. So even though we use the term concentration, so that term can evolve as we continue. At the beginning it is very much like we are paying kind of a focused attention onto various phenomena, and that is how the observation or the investigation is continued. But later it can lead to different levels. So therefore the terminology simply using samadhi as the concentration we can't really accept, but anyway that is something that we all can understand. So I am also using the same term as the concentration. So at the beginning it's a matter of concentrating, reducing distractions, and very much like being with ourselves. So basically our mind is scattered either to the past, to the future, to various objects, what we see, hear, smell, taste. But all those distracted instances actually taking us out. Nowadays, a lot of possibilities are there to distract ourselves. Say for example, social media and various newspapers, say news articles, magazines, say advertisement, this and that, everything is distracting us. But here in the practice, so we need a fairly concentrated mind, one-pointed mind to continue the practice in order to investigate various phenomena. So therefore the samatha practice is one essential part, how to maintain our attention continuously to a selected object, to a selected wholesome object. So time to time that also has to be supported. And on the other hand, Buddha does not stop there, and Buddha prefers the last one, that is the vipassana anugahita, how you are going to contribute towards the insight practice. So how are we going to support to insight practice? So that is what we can probably discuss in length during the discussion times, and also I can emphasize during the Dhamma sermons as well. So that also has a wide range, starting with paying attention to some conventional things and later discarding all those conventional stuff and taking yourself to a very basic, very fundamental kind of experience and trying to investigate those direct experiences, and trying to understand their true nature, and it will lead to further understanding, or we can say various insight knowledges. So likewise the insight practice has to be continued, has to be supported time to time, and depending on where we are, so we may continue differently in the insight practice as well. So these are the actually Buddha mentioned the 5 types of support that we need to contribute towards our practice. Now I like to refer kind of a simile. Suppose you are going on a long journey. So if it is quite long, you may carry a water bottle and some food and maybe some essential items. And as you continue, sometimes you may feel that you need some water, then you are drinking some water. And sometimes you feel that you need a rest, probably you are resting. And sometimes you feel that you need to sleep, so you are finding a rest house or kind of a place, and then you are taking a rest. If you are hungry, you need to have some food, and you can't stop there and you need to continue. So likewise it's a kind of a journey. So during this long journey, many different ways that you need to contribute, you need to support this journey. So similarly in our spiritual journey also, so these 5 supports Buddha mentioned are essential, and time to time we need to support. So we need to recognize when I need to support through the sila, through the morality, when it is quite necessary to support through the through the Sutta, that is the listening to Buddha's teaching, and to develop kind of an understanding, and then when to practice the discussion, involved with fruitful discussion, and when we need to concentrate the mind, collect the mind, and how are we going to continue the vipassana practice. So likewise it's a kind of a combination of all these different supports that we need to have, And if we are doing that successfully, Buddha confirms that you can have a deep understanding, you can have a kind of a liberation, either in the mind or the wisdom. That means this whole thing ultimately leading to the liberation, to the vimukti. So those are the initial things I like to mention. So that is why this whole retreat, we are trying to support all these 5 different ways. So we administer precepts and we are trying to maintain the sila, the morality. And again, through a Dhamma sermon, we are trying to contribute some teachings from the Buddha's teachings. And again, we are going to have a discussion. And we all are involved with Samatha and Vipassana practice. And now I like to come to the topic that I have selected. So this topic is available in the Majjhima Nikaya as the 95th Sutta. It is called Canki Sutta. And it's very interesting sutta. It has some academic stuff as well as a fair relevance, fair emphasis onto practical aspects as well. Let me give you some background information about how the sutta starts. And one time Buddha was in the Kosalan country, and where a Brahmin village called Opasada. And this Brahmin village, Opasada, is actually a gift given by King Pasenadi Kosala to a Brahmin called Canki. So Canki is a very well known, reputed Brahmin, and he is a teacher of 300 Brahmin students, and he is a really gifted person, and he is a very reputed person. And again, there's a huge reputation available with respect to him. I'm not going to detail each and every aspect. Anyway, the king, as a respect to this particular teacher, Brahmin teacher, he has offered this whole Brahmin village, which is called Opasada. So now Buddha arrives at Opasada Brahmin village with 500 bhikkhus, and now Buddha's reputation is now spreading throughout the Brahmin village. So, as you know, typically Buddha's reputation is explained using our traditional Itipiso Bhagava Arhang Samma Sambuddho. So Buddha is a self-enlightened, and he is worthy of gifts, and he is the supreme teacher, and likewise, so all these different aspects of Buddha, the qualities of the Buddha, is heard by many Brahmins. And now they are going to see the Buddha. Now, once a particular teacher arrives the village, so that certain reputation with respect to that teacher is now spreading. Now all the different groups of Brahmins now approaching to see the Buddha, to discuss with the Buddha, to have a discussion. Now Canki, on the other hand, he is staying on his palace, and he is having a little relaxed time, and he is simply staying in the upper story of his palace, and he see this group of people approaching this particular forest where Buddha is staying. In the Opasada village, there's Buddha is staying in what we call Salavana, the name given to that particular forest where Buddha is staying. Now many groups of Brahmins are approaching that particular direction where the Buddha is staying, and that is being noticed by Brahmin Canki. Now he asks one of his ministers why this group of Brahmins are going in that direction. And then the minister was aware of the situation, and he explained that Buddha has arrived there, and this kind of a reputation is available to the Buddha, and that's why these people are going to that direction. Now what happened is Canki decides, okay, let me also join the group, let me also participate. And so he is sending a message to the group telling, so just wait, I am also coming. And when the people get to know that Canki also going to join, so some of the Brahmins who came for some other thing, the 500 Brahmins, and they don't want to hear that, because Canki himself is a very reputed person, and he's a Brahmin teacher and an old person, and he himself being a quite reputed old teacher, so going to Buddha is not something acceptable. So you can refer the kind of the orthodox type of attitude that the Brahmins had during that time. And now these 500 Brahmins, now they want to stop Brahmin teacher Canki going to see the Buddha. And now they are telling various things. So you are coming from a very good family, Canki, your paternal side generation is quite pure, your the maternal side is quite pure, and you are very versed in the Vedas, and you are maintaining good sila, the virtues, and you are really wealthy, and you are being reputed and again gifted by the king. So likewise, so much of information is there explaining the wealth, the gifted, the knowledge, reputation of Canki, and referring that actually these 500 Brahmins wants to stop the Brahmin Canki going to visit the Buddha. Instead, what they are suggesting is that the Buddha has to come and see Canki, the Brahmin teacher Canki. But anyway, the Brahmin teacher Canki seems to be a very sensible person and very honest person, and he is now refuting, telling, I am the one who should go and see the Buddha. So one argument he is making is the same kind of information referring to the Buddha. That means he also coming from a very good family, he is also from a wealthy family, and he is an achieved person, he is a spiritual teacher, he is a teacher for many humans, and he is a teacher for many gods, and his reputation is spreading all around the India, and many have come forward and going forth for him. And again, certain kings, Pasena the Kosala and Pasena this Bimbisara, have gone forth to him. So likewise, some information somehow Canki also get to know. So he is explaining those information to those 500 Brahmins. And further he mentioned that whenever a guest come into a particular village, it is not the guest who is going to see a particular person in that area, rather the person who is in charge of that area going and greeting the guest. So that should be the tradition. So therefore I am the one who should go and meet the Buddha. So likewise he was able to convince those Brahmins, and he is the one going to meet the Buddha. So he also joins the group. Now he is going to see the Buddha with his 300 students. So it's kind of an interesting story. And now they all go to see the Buddha, and during the gathering, now Buddha and the elder Brahmins are having a kind of a cordial discussion, and they are exchanging greetings, and now they are in a kind of a discussion. And while these elder Brahmins and the Buddha are discussing certain topics, there is one young Brahmin called Brahmin Karpatika, and he actually can't wait. Now typically what happens is when a certain teacher and other elderly Brahmins are in a kind of a discussion, higher discussion, so we have to wait, we have to respect their say elderliness, their respect or their reputation, and we have to take a chance, we have to wait till the chance is given for us to talk rather than interrupting the discussion. But this Brahmin Karpatika can't wait, and he is so enthusiastic about the discussion. So time to time he is trying to interrupt. Now Buddha noticed him, and he is now informing Karpatika, just wait for your chance. Now we are in a good discussion. Now these elderly Brahmins are telling something, so just wait. So very interesting, very kind of live discussion. So these are very common things. So at that time, so the Brahmin Canki, the teacher, actually now say a very interesting thing. And he says, Bhante, this Karpatika is a very bright student. So he is capable of participating in this discussion. He is well versed in the Brahmin hymns, and he is well versed in all three Vedas, And he is also coming from a very good family. All the 7 generations are quite pure. And likewise, so he too is really deserving the participating to this discussion. Now this is very, very interesting in a way, because it is not that the Brahmin Canki just want to highlight himself and want to respect, say, the other elders, but he like to invite even a very young 16-year-old, a bright student to the discussion. It's very interesting. So sometimes we might think, okay, they are kind of suppressing the youngs, or maybe the students. Rather, now we can see a kind of an open attitude in Canki's mind, where he is welcoming a young student who is quite capable, and he has understood his potential, and he sort of welcomes his participation, and he informs that to the Buddha. And while that discussion is going on, now Kapatika actually have a kind of a thought. What Buddha mentioned is also true, because my teachers, my elders are discussing something with the Buddha. It is not respectful for me to interrupt. Better I wait for some time. When Buddha see my face, then that indicates, I may take that as an indication for me to participate. So that's a kind of an internal decision that he has taken. When the Buddha turns his head to that particular person, to myself, so then I'm going to speak. Very interesting. So Buddha has seen that thought, what is happening in Kapatika's mind. So he has taken such a decision, and Buddha has seen through his divine eye. So what this Kapatika has thought. Now Buddha, it seems like, continued the discussion for some more time, and then when the time permits, now Buddha turns his eyes to the Brahmin Kapatika. Then Kapatika understood, okay, now is the time. Now the teacher, the Buddha, has looked at me. Let me participate in this discussion. And actually, if we consider this whole scenario and this whole sutta, it is the Kapatika who is the protagonist, who is contributing to the whole discussion, and not the Canki, not the other elders. Rather, this 16-year-old, very bright student, who is the one asking various questions, and so the Buddha elaborating some deeper practice. Now, interesting question that the Kapatika asking is relevant to their teachings, the Brahmanic teachings. So he's asking, now these Brahmins, the Brahmin elders, are accepting what is coming from oral transmission, and they think that is the best, that is the truth, and everything is wrong, everything is empty. What do you think about that? So this is the question he is asking from the Buddha. Now he, being a Brahmin youth, probably he might have a doubt, I don't know, but anyway he is in a way asking the Buddha's view about their own teachings. Now he accepts that these teachings are coming from oral tradition, and many previous generations, previous teachers are sort of continuing that. He himself have learned that, and those have come from oral tradition, and they think, their teachers or the Brahmins, elder Brahmins, they think so that is the truth, everything else is wrong, everything else is empty. What do you think about that? So he is asking from the Buddha. Now Buddha in a way asks a kind of a cross question. He is telling, are there any of your teachers telling, I know this, I have seen this, that's why I am telling, okay, this is the only truth, everything else is wrong, everything else is empty. I have experienced this, I have known this, I have seen it by myself, through my direct knowledge. That's why I am telling, okay, this is the only truth, everything else is wrong. Has any of your teachers mentioned that? So Buddha is asking from Kapatika. And then Kapatika said, no, they haven't said so. And then Buddha continue that to further generations. Say, is your previous teachers who has taught these teachers, have they mentioned such a thing? Have they claimed that they have seen it, they have experienced it? And therefore that is the truth and everything else is false. They also haven't said so. And now Buddha is asking all the different 7 generations, up to 7 generations, have they, any of them, mentioned it is that something that they have really experienced, that they have seen directly, they understood that, and as a result of that, they are telling that is the truth, everything else is false. And Karpatika honestly accept, they are also not claiming like that. And then Buddha mentioned, so there are certain rishis, there are very old rishis who have taught these Brahmanic teachings. And certain names are given in the Sutta, different names, Attaka, Vamaka, Vamadeva. So likewise some Brahmanic teachers who actually composed the teaching, who actually created the teaching, Brahmanic teaching. And have they also mentioned that they fully understood that, they experienced that, they have seen it directly? That's why we are telling that's the only truth, everything else is false. And Karpatika mentioned, no, they also haven't said like that. Now Buddha giving a interesting simile here. And he say, now suppose there is a blind person. And that blind person can't see anything, but he tell something, okay, this is something like this. Another blind person who simply accepts that without properly seeing it, he simply accepts it and he tells to another blind person. He also simply accepts that without properly seeing. So likewise, it's going from generation to generation. So it is, in Pali it is called an andaveni. Kind of a blind person to blind person is going on and on, but there is no proper verification. So don't you think that your teaching is something like that? So therefore it is kind of baseless. So kind of a strong comment in a way that Buddha is making about the whole Brahmanic teaching. So therefore this whole teaching is fairly groundless. So once that is mentioned, so this Karpatika couldn't stand his kind of understanding, or wouldn't stand with his kind of logic. So he is telling, no, not just merely through faith. So we are accepting this because we are coming not only with faith, but also coming from oral tradition. That is called Anussara. So not merely through faith that we accept this is the truth, everything else is false, but coming from oral tradition, from one generation to another generation, it has come unbroken from an oral tradition. That's why we are accepting that. So now he is giving another reason for them to accept the Brahmanic teachings. Now at that point, actually Buddha informed this Karpatika that first now you talked about the faith. Now you are accepting all these teachings by faith because your teachers are telling everything else is false, this is the only truth, out of respect, out of faith that you accepted that. Now I have refuted that. But now you are telling it is not merely through faith, it is because of it is coming from generation to generation by an oral tradition. That is why we are accepting it. But here there are 5 grounds that one can come into a conviction, one can come into a conclusion, one can come into a decision, and those 5 methods, those 5 grounds either can be true, either can be false. Now those 5 actually includes what this Karpatika has mentioned. Karpatika has mentioned 2 methods. The first one is the faith, saddha. Second one is the anussava, the oral tradition. Now Buddha completes that whole, what we can call the epistemology, the kind of gathering of knowledge, understandings. how we come to conclusions, how we come to decisions. So 5 methods are mentioned in this particular sutta, and those are the 5 grounds that one can search, one can look into in order to come to a conclusion. So anyway, during the Dhamma sermons, we can go through these 5 topics, and those are quite relevant, and those require some kind of attention. And those 5 actually have Saddha, Ruchi, Anussava, Akara Parivitakka, Ditti Nijjhana, Kanti. Saddha is the faith, Ruchi is our kind of approval, our taste, our preference. Then Anussava is where the coming, because from a tradition, the older tradition. Akara Parivitakka is the kind of reason, cognition. And then the Ditti Nijjhana Kanti is kind of reflective acceptance of a particular view. Now these are fairly deep in that sense, because the first one, second one, we can easily understand. Saddha, yes, we can understand. Then Ruchi, that means our own preference, also we can understand. Say for example, now when we are going forth, or when we are respecting the Buddha, so as children, so we didn't have much of information, we didn't question. Since our parents are Buddhists, probably I'm also a Buddhist. Since my teachers are telling this is correct, so I'm also simply accepting. I also have a kind of a respect. I also have a kind of a faith, kind of a trust, even towards the Buddha. So Saddha. So same thing is available even in the other religions as well. Say when certain religious leader is telling something, so out of faith, one can accept it. Now, one important thing that Buddha refers here is that it can be either true or false. Even though out of faith that we have accepted something, we can't say definitely it is truth. It can even be wrong. It can even be false. And there may be out of faith we have gone forth, we have taken refuge. We are respecting a particular teaching out of faith. And there may be possibilities that we are disrespecting, we are ignoring, and we think it is wrong, and as a result of that we are discarding another teaching. But it can even be correct. It may be factual. It may be true. So therefore, what Buddha mentioned here is quite inviting kind of a open-minded attitude, rather than simply blindly following something and come to a conclusion. Here Buddha invites, encourage kind of an open attitude. So faith is one aspect. And the second one is what we call the preference. So we all have different preferences. So say when we are coming from a particular tradition, when we are coming from a particular culture, a kind of a national, from a group of people, so we may have our own likes and dislikes, say as Sri Lankans. So all are rooted from Sri Lanka. So we may have our own kind of preferences. Someone born in say Australia, they have their own preferences. So depending on our preferences, we may like a particular teaching. We may like a particular kind of a, say, theory. So is that the concluding factor? Is it proper to say that only what we prefer actually are the truth, and we don't prefer, we ignore, are all false? So therefore Buddha mentioned here, even if you are accepting something out of preference, out of your own approval, it could be even wrong and it could be even correct. And if you are not accepting something, thinking that it is not your preference, that it is not your liking, and even though you discard it, it can have the truth. It may be factual. So those two things actually more into emotive. So basically it has a kind of emotional aspect, Out of faith, it's talking to our heart, and it is out of faith, out of trust that we are accepting something, and again out of our preference, our like, our desire, our ruchi, that we are accepting something. So it has a kind of a emotive turn, kind of a tone into that type of conviction. That is the way that we are approaching a particular teacher, approaching a particular teaching, a person, etc. So that is more emotional. The third one is anusava. That is where certain books are available, some sacred books are available, and those being recited for generations, and it is coming from one generation to another generation. It was, say, recorded in a particular time, and now we are reciting that, we are memorizing that, and our teachers have memorized that and they taught it to us, and now we are memorizing that and we are teaching to another group. So likewise there are possibilities. So in that way also we think those books are correct, those books are true. But the problem is there may be certain other teachings which we are not respecting, we are not really learning, and we are ignoring. And how are we going to say only these books that we are referring are correct and everything else what we have discarded are all wrong? So therefore Buddha's argument here is that even though you are learning certain books, say these religious books, sacred books, keep an open mind. Don't come to a definite conclusion. So maintain kind of an open attitude. What you haven't learned yet can have something true. So what you have learned also may be true, but it can even be false. So maintaining kind of an open attitude is quite relevant. So therefore Buddha's teaching in a way invites us to investigate. It is not a kind of a blind faith related one, rather invites us to investigate. So this anusava is more into coming from oral tradition. The last two actually are more into rational and cognitive side. This last two are akara parivitaka, kind of reason cognition. So you learn some different theories and then you sort of do some kind of reflection, as we just discussed in the Chintamaya Panya. So you do some reasoned analysis. As a result of that, you come to a kind of a conclusion. But how about missing one important point? How are you definitely saying, okay, all the necessary definitive factors I have included in this analysis? Now this is very scientific in a way. Now say if you are coming to a kind of a scientific research, and we are using the control group and various other mechanisms, and you are trying to come to a kind of a finding or research, maybe a conclusion. So it requires for you to analyze all the possibilities, and it's a must to understand what are the contributing factors. What happens if we missed one important factor? Then our conclusion could be entirely wrong. So how can we say that our conclusion is the best one, our conclusion is the most accurate one? Now say for example, some time back certain scientists have understood, they did various experiments and they have come to a particular conclusion. Maybe after a couple of years, certain other group of scientists, they simply show, okay, that particular finding is entirely wrong. Now a new finding has come to the picture. So that is how the science is evolving. So one finding is being further investigated later, and now it is being ignored, the previous finding being ignored or maybe altered because of the new evidences. So therefore that also has certain amount of open-minded attitude. So Buddha refer here in this fourth one, akara parivitaka. So that is the recent cognition. So therefore don't think that even though it is cognitive, even though it is somewhat intellectual, don't think that is the only correct thing. Don't think that is conclusively that is the only correct true thing. What you haven't analyzed, what you haven't cognitively reflect, can be even true. Therefore, even there, maintain kind of a open attitude. And then the last one, Ditti Nijjhana Kanti. That means certain views are already available. Say a particular view regarding something. And you think about that particular view. Your own analysis is done on that particular view, and based on your reasoning, your considerations, and you also now decide, okay, that view is correct. So that is also having some amount of cognitive analysis, some amount of investigation. But here Buddha mentioned, even there, don't think that is the only correct thing. Don't come to a definite conclusion. Probably there may be certain other view that could be wrong, that could be correct, which you haven't analyzed, that you haven't pondered. So you can see, so these are the 5 things according to the Buddha, that how we come to a kind of a conclusion, how we come to a gathering of a knowledge, how we come to a conviction. First thing is the saddha, out of faith. Second one is the ruchi, out of our preference. Third one is anusava, when things are coming from the oral tradition, from the books. Fourth one is akara parivitakka, that is called your own reflective analysis. And the last one is Ditti Nijjhana Kanti. So there are already established certain views, and you also think about that particular view, and you come to a conclusion. Now you can see, now Buddha here going to a really interesting areas in the knowledge in that sense. So Kapatika being a very well-versed, really bright student, and the Brahmins in the audience are also quite learned, including the Canki. So the audience is really an academic and kind of intellectuals. Now Buddha is also giving a fairly intellectual contribution to the picture, to the discussion. Now, after mentioning that, after explaining that, now Buddha mentioned, even though this I would say as the preservation of truth, I don't say this is the discovery of the truth. Now in this sutta actually we can see there are 3 stages into the truth. First one is called the preservation of the truth, Satchanurakkhana. Second one is called the discovery of the truth. You discover the truth. That is called Satchanubodha. Third one is called Satchanupatti. So that is the final arrival at the truth. So you can see the truth, the teaching, the understanding is a deeper subject. So and immediately you can't comprehend the whole truth, and you can't even discover what is the truth. So it's a kind of a research we can say. So you can't immediately come to a full understanding, comprehensive understanding of the truth, realization of the truth. What you need to do first is kind of a research. What you can do is some kind of a what we call the Satchanurakkana. So you have to use the previous 5: Saddha, Ruchi, Anusava, Akara, Parivitakka, Ditti, Nijjhana Kanti. So you can start using one of those 5 methods, and now you can come to some kind of a faith, preference coming from generations, whatever it is, about the truth. Say for example, if we take our own Buddha's teaching. So how are we going to say it is the only truth? So we are going to have a kind of an open mind. So we may have faith, But have we really experienced that? So everything what Buddha mentioned, have we really experienced that? Or are we simply blindly following? So therefore, even in the Buddha's teaching, so these 5 methods, 5 grounds Buddha mentioned is quite valid. And so having faith is important. One way of understanding Buddha's teaching is therefore having faith. But what we have understood so far might have the truth or might not have the truth. There may be some more to understand, some more to investigate in the Buddha's teaching which we haven't understood yet, haven't explored yet. Therefore maintain a kind of an open attitude. So that's what Buddha's Chandaratana. So the how you are sort of preserving the truth, how you are protecting the truth. Suppose that the Buddha's teaching is the truth. Now if we want to protect it, yes, we need to learn it, we need to understand it, we need to recite it, we need to memorize it, maybe out of faith. So faithfully we are doing it. So one group of people, so they think Buddha's teaching is correct and faithfully they are following it, they are learning it, they are studying it, they are memorizing it. But Buddha is telling, so you can do that preservation, you can protect the teaching, but don't think is the only truth what you have learned so far is the only thing, is the only correct thing. What you haven't learned yet can be the more profound truth. So have a kind of an open mind. Even within the Buddha's teaching, so having such kind of open attitude is quite relevant. Say as children, so we have learned about the noble truths. I'm just giving a simple example. So as Sunday school children or as Sunday school teachers, so we have learned about the 4 noble truths. So you are asking the question from a young student, what are the 4 noble truths? So he may write the noble truth of suffering, noble truth of cause of suffering, the noble truth of cessation of suffering, and path leading to the cessation of suffering, and you give 10 marks. So that is the level of understanding he has. So can we say that he fully understood 4 noble truths? So we can't say like that. So what he has understood still is very primary, very superficial, and simply a book knowledge. And what he not understood yet still may be more profound. So as he is continuing his understanding, as he is continuing further his practice, now he is getting more and more thorough understanding, practically maybe, experientially. That may be the more profound truth. So likewise, even Buddha's teaching, as we are coming to the teachings, as we are exploring, what we have already gathered may have certain amount of truth, may have certain amount of understanding, but what we haven't explored yet also may have certain amount of truth. So having such kind of open attitude is something Buddha is encouraging. And even in the ruchi, say you prefer something, out of preference that you are selecting a particular religion, out of your likes that you prefer a particular kind of a teaching. And now you are investigating that, you are protecting it, you are trying to preserve it. That is necessary. And that is quite relevant, that is quite necessary. But maintaining open attitude even there. So that is what Buddha mentioned here. Now if you want to preserve it, it is coming out of your own preference. Now you are reciting it, now you are learning it, now you are memorizing it because you want to preserve it. But have a kind of an attitude where what I have preserved, what I have learned might have the truth or might not have the truth. And even in the Anusara, the same thing. There are various traditional books, sacred books, and if you want to preserve them, yes, you need to learn them, you need to protect them, you need to by heart, you need to learn them, recite them, you need to respect them. That is necessary. You can't simply ignore them, you can't simply discount them, you need to learn. But what Buddha mentioned here is that maintain kind of an open attitude. Similarly, when you do kind of an analysis, Different reasons are there, different causes are there, and you take all these different causes, reasons, and now you come to a kind of an analysis, but still maintaining kind of an open attitude. What I have learned, what I have gathered, might have the truth, might not have the truth. And last one is actually where the Canki, where already available views are there, very established, very well established, and you also can investigate them, but maintain an open mind. So there, the advice from the Buddha to Kapatika is how we do this preservation, how we do this, what kind of protecting of the truth. And our understanding of the truth is fairly subjective. We can't say ultimately I am the one who understands the truth, everything else is wrong, everyone else is wrong, their understanding is incomplete. Actually, my understanding itself is incomplete, so that's the Buddha's kind of the indication. So therefore, having kind of a open attitude, having kind of an innocent approach, ready to learn, ready to investigate various opinions, and have some time to ponder to different alternatives is quite necessary. So therefore, even if you consider our own meditation, various techniques are available nowadays, many different techniques. Some technique may even differ with another technique. They not sometimes go in line. So how are we going to say our technique is the only correct technique? So having kind of an open mind is quite relevant. But anyway, preserving that is also necessary. Satcham Rakkana is also a valid thing. So if you think, okay, out of faith, okay, this method is correct, now you need to learn it. You need to investigate it. You need to, even practice it. Actually, practicing part we need to take separately. So even into the various meditation techniques, we can apply this whole theory. So these 5 methods, 5 grounds are quite valid to many areas. And till we come to the second stage, that is the awakening to the truth or discovery of the truth, we have to maintain a fairly open attitude. So this discovery of the truth by ourselves, touching the truth, understanding the truth by direct knowledge, awakening to the truth is very, very crucial. So till that happens, having a very open mind is something encouraged in this sutta. And I think for today that is enough, and we will investigate further and go ahead with this sutta further on tomorrow and day after. With that, I like to conclude today's Dhamma sermon. Thank you very much for attentive listening.